Rebecca, so just going to show you how to import a reference image and trace it out in Fusion. So we go to Insert Canvas, we select our image. With Fusion you always get these little pop-up menus to kind of explain what you need to do next, and the thing we need to do is tell it what surface to place that image on. So I'm going to pick this one here. If your camera view looks different to mine, so for example you're in like a top view, if you click on this little home icon it will give you that ISO view, and so for the face I'm going to select this one. Then just going to drag the image out a bit. Don't worry about the scale too much at this stage because we're going to calibrate it in just a second. When we're happy with it we're going to press enter or OK. At the moment, if we were starting to trace and 3D model this, we wouldn't actually know what kind of scale it's at. So the first thing we need to do before we start modeling or tracing is to calibrate the image and give it real-world dimensions. So to do that, we control right-click on the image in the canvas drop-down. If you can't see this, it might be that your folders are shut, but if you open them up and then control right-click and select calibrate, you're then going to pick 2 points on your image where you know how far apart they are. So in this case I'm going to go from here to here. I'm then going to tell this I want it to be 30 centimeters, so 300 millimeters. I'm then going to zoom out a little bit, and now I know that if I start modeling on this, that this point to this point is 30 centimeters, which is the dimension that I want the final piece to be from here to here as well. Okay. So once my image is in there and calibrated, we can actually begin to start modeling. So the first thing I want to do is just do a simple like rectangle extrusion as a kind of backing board. So create sketch, again picking that back plane, select rectangle, and let's go roughly from corner to corner. If you want to dimension your shape, hit the shortcut D, select one of the edges, move up slightly, click it to place it, and type in manually what dimension you want. So I'm just going to do these two. If you want to change that at any point, you just double click it, and again you can manually input the dimension you want, and you see it resizes my rectangle. Yeah. So once we're happy with the rectangle, finish sketch, move to a slightly ISO view. We can either press the extrude shortcut here or down here. Click it. And then you can either manually drag this to create thickness, or you can input it here. So I'm just going to put 10 mil and press enter. So we've got a kind of like backing slab. And then what I want to start doing is tracing out the detail. So to do that, I'm going to create a new sketch. I want to tell the software that I want to draw on the top surface of my extruded rectangle. So I just click it. And then to trace the image, I'm going to be using splines, and splines are kind of similar to vector lines in Illustrator. So select spline, I'm going to go to the edge of my box, and I'm just going to roughly place my line in the software. And you don't need it to be particularly accurate at this point, you just need to place the line down. And then what you can do is zoom in a little bit and just begin to pull on these spline points to get it more accurate. If you're finding it hard to see the image, just switch off this extruded rectangle by using the eyeball thing, and that's basically just making that first extrusion that I did invisible, and so I can actually see my image a little bit more clearly. And so I'm just going along and adjusting my spline. If you feel like you need extra points along your spline, just control right click and do insert spline fit point, and you can actually add more. I personally prefer to have less spline points, I find it easier to control, but if you do a few too little, you can manually add them like this. Once you're happy with your added points, just hit enter, and then you can continue adjusting. My tip when adjusting your spline points is to work from one end along. Don't adjust one here and then adjust one like over here. Instead, work from one end and just go along, and it will give you a lot more control over that movement. Splines can take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you've got it figured out, they're really easy to work with. So that's our first spline. So I'm going to press Finish Sketch. I'm then going to switch the visibility of my original extruded body back on. Go to the ISO home view. I can then go to Create Extrude, select that profile we just created, and extrude it again. So might go for 3.5 mil this time. Yeah. And hit Enter when you're happy with it. And you're basically just going to continue doing that. So create sketch, select the top surface of your design, get a nice view orientation, and then just work with the splines. So let's go for something a little bit more complicated. Again, just sporadically placing down my splines. If you want to end a spline, you just double click, and then you can begin another one. So if you don't want to just do a massive continuous line, yeah, you can begin a new one. Don't know what's going on there. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Seems to be getting a bit confused, so I can always select a spline and press backspace to delete it. I don't know why it's giving me a bit of an error there. So again, you can see I'm just going around like really roughly to just show you roughly how it works. Again, ending my spline there, and grabbing a new one. I would say for the 3D printing in ceramic, it's better that the gaps between areas are like bigger rather than smaller. And what I mean by that is like, try not to have things like too close to the line above. The more spacious it is, the better that the detail is gonna come out. So I am really whizzing through this just so you don't have to watch me doing this for ages. And I'm not going to bother going through all of these crevices. I mean, you totally should, but I'm just going to quickly just cap this off. Otherwise, you're just going to be watching me trace around everything for a super long time. But yeah, you could just trace as many of those details as you want. I think I need to add a couple of extra splines on here. Hit Enter, just bring it around. Okay, cool. Again, once you're happy with your outline, finish your sketch and create extrude. And you know, you can either make it the same height as your first extrusion, or you can play around with that a bit. It's up to you. I think my last one was 3.5. I can make this one 5. Just keep in mind that the thicker and the more dense you make this, the longer the print time is going to be. Because what I was hoping was that we'd be able to print this kind of like this way on the build plate, like upright. So the build plate would be here, but these overhangs are too great. Like, you can't print perpendicular to the build plate. So what I'd hoped is that we could have chamfered these edges, and chamfering is when you like bevel off an edge. And I was really hoping we could chamfer these edges and print it upright like this. But unfortunately, because the design is quite complicated, there are some edges that it won't let us chamfer. So just to make that super clear, chamfer is when you, yeah, like bevel an edge like this. Yeah, even that edge it's struggling with. Yeah, so it's when you kind of put like one of these slightly angled edges on. And that would be great if we were going to 3D print like this way around, because it means that the printer would have an angle and it wouldn't just have this like 90-degree angle overhang, which it can't do. But because our design in kind of is kind of a bit too complicated for to do chamfer edges on all of the edges. So like if I try to do a chamfer on these edges, it just gives me an error message, even if I bring that chamfer down. And that's to do with the curves. It can't chamfer like this when there's like a tight curve. And what that means is these edges then become impossible for us to do upright on the build plate. And that's a real shame, because printing it upright would have given us a pretty decent level of detail. And we could have also printed it hollow in the middle with a single perimeter wall. But instead, we're going to have to print it like flat on the build plate like this. So we're not going to get as much of a kind of clean print. And we're also going to have to print it with infill throughout, which means a longer print time. It's not the end of the world, but it just means that our print won't be quite as neat as I would have liked it, and will also take a bit longer. But anyway, so I'm just going to quickly undo that chamfer. This is a nice thing about Fusion. You have this timeline at the bottom, and I can literally move the timeline back. I can control right click and tell it to delete features after the history marker, and it will get rid of that feature. So yeah, pretty much what we'd have to do is keep doing more sketches and extrusions. If at any point you wanted to go back into an existing sketch and edit it, so say you thought one of these lines is not exactly right, you find the sketch that it was created in, so in this case this one, control right click edit sketch, it activates that particular sketch, and you can actually go in, change it, finish it, and it will update the entire object. Same with your extrusions. So say for example you decided, oh, that's not as deep as I want it to be, you can go control right click, edit feature, and you can manually adjust this, press OK, and it will update the whole design. So throughout that kind of modeling process, you can go back through your timeline and make changes. Now, aside from extruding upwards, you can also cut into your model. So say for example, I wanted to add this like eye detail. I could just go create sketch, click on the top surface of the outline of the animal, and then going to zoom in a little bit, select my spline, and draw this around, and just get that looking nice. I can see it's got a slight offset, so modify offset, select my spline, bring this in a bit, and press enter, finish sketch, create, extrude, select my profile. Now if I drag up, it will extrude and add volume. If I drag towards a solid shape, it's actually going to cut into it. So I could tell it to go to, I don't know, -5, press OK, and it actually cuts into the object. So you can use this extrusion thing to add and also subtract material. I think that's about it for now. Yeah, just have a go at tracing that all out. Get your extrusions done. I would say the less chunky the design is, the better. If you could keep your extrusions not too thick, that would be best, because something like this is going to take ages to print, whereas something like 3 or 5 mil is going to be a bit more efficient. Yeah, I think that's about it for now. Have a go at this and let me know how you get on.